Welcome to Come Follow Me Primary Kids. This week, we'll be looking at the lesson titled, My Heart Rejoices in Jehovah, and it includes the chapters of Ruth and 1 Samuel, chapters 1 through 7. Let's get started. Life doesn't always go the way we expect. Sometimes we make plans and think we know what's going to happen, but changes, trials, and unexpected situations come up that force us to make tough decisions. That's what happened to two women in the scriptures, Ruth and Hannah. Even though they lived in different times, both faced challenges that completely changed the course of their lives. Ruth was a Moabite woman who had lost her husband. In that moment, she had to decide whether to go back to her people and her old beliefs or stay with Naomi, her mother-in-law, and accept the God of Israel. Hannah, on the other hand, wanted to have children, but for a long time she couldn't. This situation brought her deep sadness and led her to seek help and comfort in the Lord. The stories of Ruth and Hannah teach us that faith doesn't get rid of difficulties, but it does help us move forward when life takes an unexpected turn. They both trusted God even when they didn't know how their story would end, and the Lord blessed them in ways they never could have imagined. Their examples remind us that no matter what obstacles we run into on our path, we can trust the Lord and find joy in Him. Ruth's story started with a big tragedy. She lost her husband soon after, and both she and her mother-in-law Naomi were left in a really tough spot. Back then, a widow without a husband or kids had little chance of supporting herself. Even so, Ruth decided to stay by Naomi's side and go with her to the land of Israel. With faith and loyalty, she left her home and her people behind to follow the God of Israel. When she got to Bethlehem, Ruth worked gathering leftover grain in the fields after the harvest to feed Naomi and herself. That's when she met Boaz, a fair and kind man. According to Israel's customs, Boaz had the right to act as the family's redeemer. He protected Ruth, cared for her, and eventually married her, saving her from her tough situation and giving her a new future. The story of Boaz and Ruth helps us understand Jesus Christ better. Just like Boaz acted as a redeemer and rescued Ruth when she couldn't do it herself, Jesus Christ is our redeemer. He has the power to help us, restore us, and turn our sad moments into blessings. Because of Ruth's faith and Boaz's kindness, a story of loss turned into a story of hope, family, and joy. Ruth and Hannah faced very different challenges, but both had to learn to trust God when life didn't go as they planned. Ruth lost her husband and became a widow in a foreign land. Along with Naomi, her mother-in-law, she went back to Israel not knowing what the future held for her. Hannah, on the other hand, had a strong desire to start a family, but for many years, she couldn't have children. Both women knew the pain, the uncertainty, and the questions that arise when the blessings we're hoping for seem slow in coming. Despite their difficulties, neither of them abandoned their faith. Ruth decided to stay with Naomi and follow the God of Israel, even though it meant leaving behind everything she knew. Hannah went to the temple and poured out her heart before the Lord in sincere prayer. Even though their situations didn't change right away, they both kept trusting God and moving forward in faith step by step. In time, the Lord blessed these women in special ways. Ruth found a new home and became part of the family from which King David would descend. Hannah received the miracle she had prayed for and became the mother of the prophet Samuel. Their stories teach us that even when we don't get what's going on or when answers seem slow to come, we can trust God to guide us and have our back. He knows our struggles and never leaves those who run to Him for safety. Back in Samuel's day, the Israelites were up against the Philistines in a war. Instead of checking if they were living right by the Lord, they figured they could win by taking the Ark of the Covenant to the battlefield. The Ark was a holy symbol of God's presence, but the Israelites started treating it like it was some magic charm that'd protect them no matter how they were living. Plus, Eli's sons, who were priests, were acting wickedly and not following the Lord's commandments. The battle ended in a crushing defeat. A lot of Israelites were killed and the Philistines took the ark. But the enemies soon found out they couldn't treat God's sacred things with disdain. While the ark was in their cities, they went through all sorts of disasters and understood that the God of Israel had power over all nations. In the end, they decided to give the ark back to the people of Israel. Years later, Samuel taught the people that real protection wouldn't come from a sacred object, but from turning their hearts back to the Lord. The Israelites repented, gave up idolatry, and started serving Jehovah again. Then the Lord helped them and gave them victory over their enemies. This story shows that God's blessings don't come just from being near sacred things, but from trusting Him, repenting, and obeying His commandments. When Samuel was still a kid, he served in the tabernacle under the priest Eli. One night, something amazing happened. Samuel heard someone calling his name. Thinking it was Eli, he rushed over, but the priest told him that he hadn't called him. This happened 3 times. Eventually, Eli understood that it was the Lord speaking to the boy and taught him how to respond. When Samuel heard the voice again, he said, "Speak, for your servant hears." From that moment, he started receiving revelations from the Lord. Samuel learned that listening to God's voice requires attention, willingness, and obedience. Even though he didn't recognize that voice at first, he was ready to listen and follow the instructions he was given. Samuel's story teaches us that the Lord still speaks to His children. Sometimes His voice doesn't come in a spectacular way, but rather through feelings, thoughts, spiritual promptings, and the teachings of the Scriptures. Like Samuel, we can learn to recognize the Lord's voice if we sincerely seek Him and are willing to respond, "Speak, for your servant hears." While Samuel was growing and serving in the tabernacle, Eli's sons were going in a very different direction. Hophni and Phinehas were priests, but the Scriptures say they didn't honor the Lord. They abused their positions, taking what belonged to the sacred offerings for themselves, and they didn't respect the laws God had set for service in the tabernacle. Even though they had great spiritual responsibilities, their actions showed they weren't following the Lord. Eli knew his sons were doing wrong and warned them several times, but they didn't want to listen or change. Eventually, Hophni and Phinehas' disobedience brought consequences for them and Eli's household. This story shows that just having a calling or responsibility in the church isn't enough. What really matters is living according to God's commandments. While Eli's sons were drifting away from the Lord, Samuel was growing in faith and obedience. The Scriptures show a very clear contrast between the two examples. While some ignored God's voice, Samuel learned to listen to it. This teaches us that each person must choose for themselves who they will follow, no matter what those around them do. In this section, we learned that the Lord can turn tough times into great blessings, just like He did in the lives of Ruth and Hannah. We also saw that true protection and help come when we trust God and follow His commandments. We learned from Samuel's example, who listened to and followed the Lord's voice, and the contrast with Eli's sons, who chose to disobey. These stories remind us that no matter our circumstances, we can trust God, hear His voice, and follow Him in faith. That was the class of the week. Stick around for the trivia. This week we're learning the lesson titled, "My Heart Rejoices in Jehovah," and we're studying the books of Ruth and Samuel. Let's test what you know. What was the name of the Moabite woman who decided to follow the God of Israel and stay with Naomi? A. Anna, B. Deborah, C. Ruth, D. Rebecca. That's right, Ruth showed great faith by leaving her home to follow the Lord. What did Samuel answer when he realized it was the Lord calling him? A. Here I am, send me. B. Speak, for your servant is listening. C. Jehovah is my shepherd. D. Thy will be done. That's right, Samuel teaches us the importance of being willing to listen to God's voice. Who acted as Ruth's redeemer and eventually married her? A. Eli, B. Samuel, C. Joshua, D. Boaz. That's correct, Boaz is a beautiful representation of Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. Why were the Israelites defeated when they took the Ark of the Covenant into battle? A, because they trusted in the ark more than in obeying God. B, because the ark was damaged. C, because there were fewer soldiers. D, because Samuel was absent. All right, blessings come from following the Lord, not just from being around sacred things. We're going to level up a bit, so call your whole family. What contrast do the scriptures show between Samuel and the sons of Eli? A, Samuel was a priest and they were kings. B, Samuel was physically stronger. C, Samuel listened to the Lord while they disobeyed him. D, Samuel lived in Bethlehem and they lived in Jerusalem. Well, each person decides for themselves whether they will listen to or ignore God's voice. What did Hannah do when she was suffering because she couldn't have children? A, she left the temple. B, she poured out her heart in prayer to the Lord. C, she went to live in another city. D, she asked Naomi for help. That's right. Hannah teaches us that we can come to the Lord with our deepest concerns. How many did you get right? Tell us in the comments. We're learning the story of Ruth, so today we're going to learn how to draw Ruth to help us remember it. You'll need a sheet of white paper, a pencil, pen, or marker to do your outline, and colored pencils or markers. Let's begin. We'll start by outlining Ruth's face. First, we'll draw an ear that looks like the letter C. Inside it, we'll make a mark like this. From here, we'll start on her face. We're going to draw something very similar to the letter U, making the right side slightly longer than the other. And now we'll draw the neck below this face, with two downward curves, connecting them with a letter U, and start drawing the hair to complete the shape. It's going to be very simple. You just need to make some irregular curves like these. We'll draw this line and bring some of the hair down here. We'll leave it unfinished because on this side we'll add the shoulders. Now above the hair we're going to draw the veil, which will just be a curve that goes around this whole shape. We're also going to leave it unfinished until we do the arms, and we're starting with the face. For that, we're going to make the nose slightly tilted to the right. We'll draw the eyes like two little dots and add eyelashes. You might notice that the face should look like it's turning to look this way. Now let's draw her eyebrows as two slanted lines and give her a smile, like you usually draw your smiles. For more detail, we're going to draw her lips, which are like half circles, one above and one below. We can add some expression lines, for example here, some small curves that make her look more smiling, also beside the mouth. And we'll start forming the rest of the body. We're going to leave a space and start tracing the hands, which will be holding a bouquet of wheat. We'll start by leaving a space with the thumb extended. Then we're going to bring the other 4 fingers down, closing this shape here. And then we'll do the other hand, where only 4 fingers will be visible due to its position. We'll close this shape completely. And in this space is where the spikes we're going to draw should go. For that, we're going to draw some lines, making sure the same line continues down here without smudging the hands we've already drawn. At the tip of these lines we've already made, we're going to create the shape of the wheat, which will be very simple, just like making a few drops around the lines. We're going to add some leaf-like shapes coming out here. They don't have to be perfect because when it comes to coloring, the drawing will make more sense. And now we'll continue with the shapes of the arms. From this point on the neck, we're going to draw a line that goes down towards the hand. Then it'll make a hook shape. On this side, we just need to connect it to the first stroke that we made for the tang, and then it'll go down this side to join the arm. We're going to make a division here so that the arm of the torso looks different, and then we'll bring the rest of the dress down. Now we're ready to finish adding some details. For example, finishing the hair and veil, adding some seams as a detail to the dress, or even more layers or movement to the dress. And that's it. That's how our drawing of Ruth turned out, and we're ready to fill it with color. And there you have it. That's how our drawing of Ruth turned out. I hope you had as much fun making it as I did. And remember, you can send yours to vensigameprimariasud@gmail.com, and then it'll appear in the next video. Thanks for drawing with us this week. We're sending shoutouts to
Olivia y Mía, del barrio San Lucas 2 en Guatemala. Ángel Fernández Covarrubias, desde el barrio La Floresta de Zamora, Michoacán. Mía González, del barrio Praderas, Panamá. Aarón Sandoval de Utah. Aidan Monforte del barrio Montecristal, en Nuevo León. Y un saludo a sus primos Adriana, Hani y Oiram, que llegaron de la misión. Samuel Ávila, de la estaca Zapata, Argentina. Génesis Scarlett, de Playa del Carmen, Quintana Roo. Marina y Mary Gold, de la estaca Vacaville, en California. Esther, Melanie y Abigail, desde Honduras. María Victoria, desde Uruguay, Montevideo. May Sivak y Brigham Yosimar Kaira Terán, de la estaca Selva Alegre, en el barrio Independencia, Arequipa, Perú. Alondra Danet y Ainara Valeria, de la Torre Leiva, barrio Elche 1, El Altet, España. Jesús Genaro Sánchez, de la estaca Anáhuac, en Nuevo León. Leonardo, desde San Luis Potosí. Dariana y Jorge Ascoy, del barrio El Milagro, en la estaca Jerusalén, Trujillo, Perú. Sara Georgina y Sofía Ramírez Rivera, del barrio Altavista, en Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua. A los niños de la primaria Hudson, en la estaca Quilmes. Kales y Kathleen Kaira Terán, de la estaca Selva Alegre, barrio Independencia, Arequipa, Perú. Fabio Paul Escobedo Asián, desde Perú, barrio Bellavista, estaca Chimbote. Amir Agustín Loaiza Chacón, del barrio El Retablo, estaca Comas, en Lima, Perú. André Ortiz Recinos, del barrio Arrazola, en la ciudad de Guatemala. Sofía Cardoso y sus primas Alba y Eva Silvano, del barrio Alberdi, de la estaca Rosario Norte. Micaela Fernanda Oreca Lumani, desde la estaca Ica, Perú, en el barrio San Isidro. Ileana Almeida, de Quito, Ecuador. Los niños de la primaria del barrio Munaipata, de la estaca Constitución, en La Paz, Bolivia. José, Caleb, Nicolás, Kiara, Abisaí y Micaela. Emily Elizabeth Flores Martínez y René Alonso Flores Martínez, del barrio Florida, de la estaca Reynosa, México. Leonel Leiva, desde la estaca La Libertad, en Puebla, México. Teo Torres dos Santos, de Sao Paulo, Brasil. Valeria Agustina Caballero Benítez, de Paraguay. Alec y Aslak, del barrio Provi, en el centro de México. Ruth y Benjamín, de Guatemala. Isabela Arroyo, de Utah. Juan Pablo Vargas y María Julieta Cervera, del barrio Ñuñoa, en Santiago de Chile. Dayana Jazmín, del barrio Aeropuerto de Tampico, Tamaulipas. Aarón, de Utah. Heitor y Miguel Acevedo, de Brasilia, Brasil. Luis y Jorge Paredes Rivadeneira, en Santiago de Chile. David Miguel Luis Casemiro, de Brasil. Ángel Fernández Covarrubias, desde el barrio La Floresta, en Zamora, Michoacán. Catalina Rivas, en Arequipa, Perú. Sara Raquel, desde Guatemala. Santiago, Mateo y Luciana, barrio El Triunfo, Estacatumbes, Perú. Esther Elena Bolívar Castro, desde Río Grande do Sul, Brasil. Caroline de Saneves, en Sao Paulo, Brasil. Alicia Yutronic Pino, del barrio Balmaceda, estaca La Serena, en Chile. Santiago Hernández, barrio Nenecuilco, en Morelos. Yarik Martín, Sami Martín y Sumac Martín, junto con su papá. Victoria, del barrio Mezquital, estaca Las Torres, en Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua. Marina, de Vacaville, California. Jairo Jacobo Moreno Aedo, Kailani Moreno Aedo y Jorge Itán Murillo Aedo, desde Hidalgo, México. David, Alonso y Vanessa, del barrio Laureles, en Celaya, México. Dylan Bustamante Moreno y su hermanita Keila Bustamante Moreno, del barrio Delicias, estaca Insurgentes, Tijuana, Baja California. Matías Toledo, del barrio Planes, San Pedro Sula, Honduras. Dayana Jazmín, del barrio Aeropuerto, en Tampico. Los niños del barrio Hickory Tree, en Orlando, Florida. Samuel Cajo Quispe, del barrio Hickory Tree, en Orlando, Florida. Alicia Botero, del barrio Viewpoint, en Arizona. Antonio y Alejandro Fuero Zárate, de la rama Huancavelica, en Perú. Esther, Tiffany y Melanie Cujuy. Joshua Flores, de la estaca Chorrillos, en Perú. Valeria y Paulo Ledesma, del barrio Bellavista, estaca Lomas Verdes, en el Estado de México. Benjamín Velázquez Gómez y Milena Velázquez Gómez, del barrio San Nicolás, de la estaca San Nicolás, Nuevo León. Andre Castillo del barrio Huanuca, Estaca Matagalpa, en Nicaragua. Calés y Kathleen Kaira Terán, de la Estaca Selva Alegre, en el barrio Independencia, en Arequipa, Perú. Walter Isaac y Luis Emilio Guzmán Díaz, del barrio Texmelucan, en la Estaca Tlaxcala, en México. Leonor Rodríguez, desde Chile. Catalina, José Luis y Helen, del barrio La Conquista, en Culiacán, Sinaloa. Un saludo hasta Arizona. Ashanti Pérez, del barrio Valencia, Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Jared Jorge Luis Fernando, de la Estaca Lima, Perú, Naranjal. Juan Pablo Vargas y María Julieta, de Santiago de Chile. Eidan Jared Monforte, del barrio Montecristal, en Guadalupe, Nuevo León. Gianela Flores, del barrio Precursores, en la Estaca Maranga, desde Lima, Perú. Lía Naomi y Lisa Ilani Martínez Pablo, de la Estaca Valsequillo, en barrio Los Héroes, en Puebla. Esther Elena Bolívar, desde Río Grande do Sul, Brasil. Natalia Abigail. Matías Fernando Maldonado Martínez, del barrio Anaco, Estaca El Tigre, en Venezuela. Sara Naomi y Amelia Elizabeth, desde Atlanta, Georgia. Emma Elías y Tiago, de la rama Viedma, en el distrito Viedma, desde Argentina. Artur y Nicolás, desde Chile, en el barrio San Pedro. Bianca Arenas y Sofía Arenas, desde Dallas, Texas. Ainara Valeria y Alondra Donet, de la Torre Leiva, en barrio Elche 1, El Altet, España. Emma y Julián Bustamante, de la Estaca Puente Alto, barrio Las Nieves. Alexandre Mita Díaz, del barrio Aeropuerto, Cajamarca, Perú. Kenneth, del barrio Izali, en el Estado de México. Kailet Párraga y Mocía Párraga, desde Ecuador. Natasha Noemí Suárez, del barrio Garupa, Estaca Posadas, en Argentina. Iris y Tatiana Lousaif, desde Cergy, en París, Francia.
Thanks for drawing with us this week, and remember, if your drawing didn't appear, don't worry, it'll probably be in the next video. See you next time.